Um, so I feel like I know everyone at least via email and indirectly. If I don't know everyone, for those I don't know in real life, if this counts for real life, nice to meet you.
This counts for real life, like I think in these times, right, Kenny?
Yeah,
like, yes, definitely. So. And welcome everyone as we're getting logged in. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to get settled in. While we're doing that, please go ahead and say hello in the chat. Let us know your name and where you're joining us from. All right, we're seeing some folks from Wyoming and Florida, New Jersey, Tennessee. Welcome, everybody. Colorado. Oh, Detroit, my hometown. Hi, everyone. Welcome. While we're getting settled in, definitely say hello in the chat. Let us know your name and where you're joining us from. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to get settled in. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm in San Francisco and we have Fleet Week. So I'm hoping that we won't have any noise from that, but I'll be muted and let Gina do most of the talking today.
I love it when they let me talk.
You always have such good things to say.
Well, I don't know about that. I make things up as I go along.
Always interesting things to say for sure. All right, well, it looks like we've got most folks settled in and joining us. Definitely, if you haven't already, let us know where you're from by saying hi in the chat with your name, your organization name, and your city or county, wherever you're joining us from. And before we get started, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping things. We'll make this really quick because for most of us, we've done this before in some form or the other. So I'm Amber Eby, and I'm a grant specialist for Maddie's Fund. We are very excited to be hosting the huddles for the Open Arms Challenge. And starting on November 22nd, we're encouraging animal shelters and rescue organizations to pilot new approaches that open doors to adopters and volunteers and welcome your entire community. We are proud to say that we have 323 organizations signed up to participate, along with 16 national organizations as partners. $200,000 in grants will be awarded to participants who complete the challenge, and we can't wait to see what you do. Today's presentation will be 20 minutes of presentation time, followed by time for live Q&A. Right now, everyone's microphone is muted so you can hear the speakers. And once the presentation has concluded, we'll open the question and answer session. You can use the chat to type your questions, or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions once the presentations are over. And finally, we are recording this session. This session will be posted to the Open Arms Challenge on Maddie's platform if you want to view it again or share it with anyone on your team. And we'll talk about this more at the end, but we definitely encourage you to join us in the forum to continue this conversation. So the moderator for today's huddle is Gina Knepp of Michelson Found Animals, who is also one of the funding partners for this challenge. Gina is going to introduce our presenters and moderate the Q&A. So please, over to you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Amber. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, wherever you might be. Today, we're going to talk about how to get your entire community involved. And I will say I know firsthand how incredibly important this is for our success and for the good of the animals. So we absolutely need people to help us if we're going to help the animals, and we cannot do it on our own. So how do you get your entire community involved? We have some really spectacular speakers today. Today we have Kenny Lamberti from C.A.R.E, which is Companions and Animals for Reform and Equity. It's C.A.R.E, not C.A.R.E, sorry. Kenny's career started in the human service space in his hometown in Boston. Kenny worked as a family advocate in the Head Start program, family programming with YMCA, and teaching in the Boston public schools, along with community organizing around violence interruption, poverty, voter registration, and more. Kenny came to animal welfare as a dog trainer and eventually landed at HSUS as one of the creators of Pets for Life. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Later as a vice president. After 3 years leading the grassroots advocacy department for Best Friends, he now has a home and perfect place to use his expertise and passion as the Chief Engagement Officer for Care Companions and Animals for Reform and Equity. And we also have Michelle Ingram from Zeus's Rescue with us today. Michelle is the owner of Zeus's Place Boarding and Grooming and the founder, executive director of Zeus Rescues, which is located in New Orleans. Founded in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina, Michelle and Zeus's Michelle and Zeus Rescues worked on eradicating pet homelessness in the New Orleans area by working with local shelters to pull adoptable pets facing euthanasia out of the overcrowded shelters. Zeus Rescues also has a robust shelter diversion program, providing pet vouchers for vaccines, microchips, spay-neuter options, a pet food bank, and free supplies of crates, leashes, collars, flea meds to families who need them to keep people with their pets instead of having to turn them into the shelter. Wow, that's a lot of experience. I can't wait to talk about our community. Let's do this. Kenny, are you starting? Are you bouncing off of each other? How are we doing this?
Yep, I think I'll get started, then hand it over to Michelle. So I love that I'm actually presenting with Michelle because I don't run a rescue. I don't run a shelter. I don't work in a municipal agency. And I think a lot of the folks, I see a lot of familiar names and faces on here who do that type of direct service work. I think it's really important to have a balance of someone like me with my perspective with someone who's, you know, for lack of a better term, in the trenches every day. And no one's more in the trenches than Michelle. So I'm going to cover a little bit the higher idea of community engagement as it relates to creating positive impact in communities and life-saving, and then let Michelle get into the nuts and bolts of how she does a really amazing job of that here. I see Michelle and her staff almost every day. My big dog and I walk by her rescue every morning and say hello to get treats. So I'm going to start off by first saying it's funny because, you know, I worked, you know, for 6 years at HSUS, 3 years at Best Friends, and now I'm with a newer organization. So I think it's important that I at least share a little quick snippet of what we are at C.A.R.E. C.A.R.E. is a young organization, but really making a pretty big splash on the scene. The founder of the organization, James Evans, someone I've known and who's not just a colleague, but a close friend for over a decade. And he played a really important role in the creation of Pets for Life, which was really born from a program called End Dogfighting, which I ran in Philadelphia. And we learned a lot through that program of how the effort, this thing we call animal welfare, was really not reaching all the communities. It wasn't reaching all the people who needed not services alone, but also information. And more importantly, we weren't taking into consideration the lived experience, the expertise, the kind of lens through which people from different communities, and especially a more diverse population of folks. Animal welfare, it's not a secret to anyone in here, so no one's gonna fall off their chair when I say this. It's pretty white, right? And typically, you know, working middle class or upper class. And that's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But what it does is it's limiting. So what we do, we don't get kind of people at the table who have different perspectives of what it takes to care for animals in a predominantly BIPOC community, and a community that is underserved financially and resource-starved. So C.A.R.E. was really formed to fill that gap. We hope to do a lot of different things, but our primary function is to build, we call it human animal well-being versus kind of animal welfare. It's just a phrase we feel comfortable with. What we are focused mostly on is engaging those communities, building a movement from within those communities and creating sustainable change that helps people maintain their agency. And I think that's an important piece that I want to discuss quickly, is that often in this field, out of mostly good intentions, when we have reached out to communities that are underserved or communities that are predominantly BIPOC, we've gone in only kind of seeing those communities as desperate and unable to help themselves and in poverty. And is there some truth, of course, that there's poverty? Of course. And is there a greater need for services? Of course. But what we don't see, and I can speak to this because I think like the Hair Club for Men, I'm not only a member, I'm a client. Like I come from a community like that. So I come from a place where we didn't have access to anything. You know, when a community is resource starved, they're resource starved for everything. education, healthy foods. You've heard the term food deserts, all kinds of different things. That includes what needs for the pets, right? And animal welfare, I think with the dawn of Pets for Life in its early days, we're trying to address that one piece specifically. How do we get spay neuter? How do we get shots and vaccines and potentially food, different things in those communities? But what it never really got to the bigger piece, because it wasn't really intended to at first, of how do we engage those communities in? How do we bring those communities into the fold to be our partners in this effort and give them the ability to take care of their own community and be the face and voice and power for their own community. So that's kind of a little bit, that's what C.A.R.E is focused on. Now, our organization is small but growing. We are 7 staff, 6 of which are people of color out of the 7. And that's important. I don't mention that just because it doesn't want to be performative. We have to walk it every day, right? So when we're in our meetings making decisions about what we're going to focus on, what our priorities are, we're getting that perspective, right? And I think it's really important when we talk about, now I'll shift to engaging the community before I pass it on to Michelle, is when we think about where are we allotting our money, right? I think of like a great organization like Maddie's Fund, and I've watched Maddie's Fund evolve over the years into looking where they commit their resources. I've watched the funding sources, which, as you all know on the line, I hope you're nodding your head, we can only do the work that we have money for, right? So if the funding entities are only funding spay neuter, I'm not saying they are now, for a while that was the biggest thing we were funding, then those are the really only things we can work on, right? Or we have to try to find a way to crowdfund. So I love that Maddie's, who I think is leading the charge on this, on looking differently at what we spend our money on. What do we invest in, right? Because like anything in life, if you want to lose weight, you got to go to the gym and you got to change your diet, right? So if you make the investment, you get the results. If we want to, better support communities that have been marginalized by no fault of their own, then we have to invest in those communities. Excuse me. So I'm happy and excited to see that Maddie's is investing in that work, not just with C.A.R.E, but in the way that they look at the rest of it. PetSmart charities and other groups, I think, or I hope, I guess, are starting to look that way too. But it's also up to all of us. I watched in the chat and I see a lot of people from humane societies and rescues and shelters. And I always ask this question of folks, like, it's great to have these talks. It's great to change our websites and our pictures and our talking points and claim that we're doing open adoptions and different things like that. But what are we really investing in, right? And if anyone knows me, has heard me speak before, I don't sugarcoat things. Or living in Louisiana, I don't put batter on things and fry them up. I like to give it to us raw and real. And, if a 19-year-old African-American kid with dreads comes into a shelter and says, man, I love pit bulls. I really want to adopt a big head pitty. I think it's important that we take a minute to say, are we really as responsive as we would be if, let's say, a white woman or a white male in 50s in a suit or in a dressed a certain way came in and said that they wanted a bully breed dog? And I think we have a long way to go, frankly, with that. I think, and part of that is representation, right? Part of that is who's in the decision-making room, who's behind the desk, who's creating the adoption policy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Because on one hand, we're saying, help us, come adopt dogs, come adopt dogs. And then when people get to the front desk, we don't make it quite as easy as we should, right? So things like open adoptions, I think community work for cats, TNR, I've said for a decade now that if we just did TNR and community cat work effectively and efficiently and did true open adoptions, we'd probably all be out of business by next year, right? If we did nothing else but those 2 things really well and really invested in it, we'd probably win, right? We'd probably be able to claim victory for however we define victory. But so I think being inclusive and diverse, and there's a term called cultural competency, which gets tossed around a lot. I prefer the word cultural humility. Cultural competency means, are you as competent as capable? Doesn't mean expert, because one can never know 100% what it's like to walk in the shoes of another person, but we can become more competent, right? And I think the only way we do that is to be open and listen. But I think cultural humility, in fact, is a more important term, is do we always position ourselves as the teachers and folks in communities as the students? And I think oftentimes I hear a lot about, we need to go out in the community and educate, right? We need to go educate about spay neuter, about responsible dog ownership, pet ownership, and things like that. And that creates such a imbalance and a power dynamic that makes people not feel welcome oftentimes. And I think that that isn't about the community, that's about us. So I think our starting point when we talk about engaging communities is looking in the mirror first. I believe we should all, I include myself in this, always be doing that and saying, what words and language am I using? What power dynamics am I creating? And is everyone truly welcome? Because I've always said this, if someone wakes up in the morning and makes a conscious choice to get in their car or get on the bus and drive to your facility, they've already decided to do the right thing. They've already made the choice that we spend millions of dollars on to market and promote to try to lead people to do. They've already done it. They're at your desk saying, I want to do a good thing, right? And if we think of that all the time and make our job to be to help them do that good thing, everybody wins. The animals win, our shelter wins, but more importantly, that person goes back to their community, to their cousins, their friends, their family, their neighbors, and says, wow, I'm just going to read the first place I see. I went to the Louisiana County Animal Shelter, or Louisa County Animal Shelter, I'm sorry, in Mineral, Virginia. I met this woman named Fiona. She was awesome. She was so nice to me. I didn't know anything about how to walk a dog. She took good care of me, and I left with this awesome dog. If you need a dog, you should go there, right? That's the experience, because that's better marketing than all the money you can spend on your local radio or your local paper or on Facebook, right? Having people, best messengers, go back to their community. So I think the key here is first looking in the mirror and looking at how are we reaching out? How are we connecting? Who are we connecting to? Because community has to be more holistic. Are we only talking to the people who think like us and already agree, right? Like if most of the people we probably know and are friends with, they already know they're going to adopt a pet and get it spay neutered, right? Are those the people we need to spend a lot of time on? Or do we need to spend more time on the people who don't know that? Not bad people. Are there bad people out there? Sure. But out of the slice of the pie, the little sliver, the 1% that makes up the bad people, we've got millions of animal control officers and cops and people out there to catch those bad people. I hate those people just as much as you. I don't want to see people fight dogs or neglect or harm an animal. But the amount of people who wake up in the morning and make a choice to harm or neglect an animal is really minuscule. The vast majority of people whose pets are suffering, they're doing the best they can and either don't know how or don't have access. And that's our job, right? That's what we signed up for. We signed up for that. So I think the first step is tweaking a little bit how we think about people. I get that this is hard work. This is exhausting, gut-wrenching, hard work. And sometimes we need to have a bad guy to justify the hurt and pain we feel every day when we come to work. And instead of looking for bad guys, we should be focusing on all the amazing people that are doing their best and trying to be the conduit to help them make better, healthy choices for their pets. So I like to stop there and let us think for a second about who we are, who we want to be moving forward, and how we want to be more inclusive and of all people from all backgrounds. Bring them in. They're our allies. People are the solutions to our problems, not the cause of our problems. So I'll stop there because Michelle, someone I call a friend and a colleague, does a really amazing job of this here in New Orleans. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Michelle, and let you get into the nitty-gritty here.
Okay, that was great. You said so many things. I even wrote them down, but I love humane animal well-being. If we say it enough, it will become the norm. Thank you. Michelle, where are you? Can't wait to hear from you. There you are. All right, welcome, Michelle.
Hi, thank y'all for having me. How are y'all doing? Allison Gibson, the picture of your kitten, by the way, I can't stare at anything else on my screen right now except the adorable newborn kitten, which reminds me I have to bottle feed in about 52 minutes. So anyway, welcome to New Orleans. Kenny is an amazing human. I see him daily with his dog Odin, who goes trick-or-treating on our street every single day. He brought home for me the idea of community and put into words what I have been doing for the last 16 years. And over the last couple of years, as our relationship has developed and changed, I've been able to hone in on some of the finer tasks that needed to be done. So I live in the middle of uptown New Orleans, and there are pockets of people that don't understand what's involved in proper pet ownership, because their whole lives they've seen pets as property, and this is not unusual to them. This is just the way that they brought up. I come from down the bayou in Cajun country where pets are property. Pets are the dogs you take duck hunting with you, and they don't need vaccines and they don't need to go to the vet if they get hit by a car, because we'll just get another one. So what I started doing years ago was walking my neighborhood and talking to the kids that I see around the neighborhood, and just developing a relationship with the investors of this community, the people that are living next door to me, down the street from me, and letting them know that there are better ways for these pets. Try to teach them some empathy of like, hey, I had a little guy come up to me one day, and he had tied a rubber band around his Rottweiler's tail because he heard that was the best way he wanted his Rottweiler to look more like the ones that he saw with a dock tail, but it had a long tail because it was a mutt, and he tied a rubber band around it. And so I was like, this is not the best way to go about doing this. It'll eventually get you the results you want, but in the meantime, it's really going to be painful for the dog. Imagine, if you were sitting there with a rubber band around your head. He goes, Miss Michelle, I never thought about that. So in developing these relationships starting with the youngest members of our community, and teaching them that I am a safe space for them, they can always tell me if they see something going wrong with a pet in the neighborhood, or even with the humans, or even with the other kids. They can come to me, and I am a judgment-free zone. I just recently, last week, and Kenny, actually 2 weeks ago, Kenny was a part of this. I had someone bring me a dumped bait dog that she knew I was a safe space. This dog was barely hanging on. If you go to my Instagram or Facebook pages, you'll see the story of Vincent. It was pretty devastating. And luckily we were able to save him. He lost an ear in the process, but it's only because I've developed these relationships with my community members that they know that they can come to me and bring me things, and I will fix it, and I will teach them instead of scolding them about, well, about this dog fighting ring. Why haven't you told me about this 3 weeks ago, or before you knew it happened? It's like, all right, here we are now. Let's fix what we have and move forward. I also, I'm huge into shelter diversion. We are New Orleans and Uptown. We have really, really rich people, and we have really, really poor people. And there is very much a small gap in between. So what I try to do is eliminate what causes the people who can't afford a pet to be able to keep their pet, and also try to help reduce the pet overpopulation. So I offer vouchers to our local vet for spay neuters. I'll microchip them. I will vaccinate them. And then I have a huge pet food bank. And what I'm finally starting to see, which is beautiful and brilliant, at the beginning of COVID, I wrote grants and got 19 pallets of dog food donated to me, and we would pass them out every Monday. We'd have lines around the block and around the corner. And so people could just come and get pet food. Well, the people who had a lot of money and had the ability to these funds started donating pet food to me on the regular, so I could turn around and give it to these members of the community. And in doing so, they weren't embarrassed by it. They weren't embarrassed to come up and say, hey, Michelle, like, I had a really bad month. We're very much a tourism industry here in New Orleans. And a lot of our wait staff and bartenders and performers were out of money and never had to ask for food or money before. And now they're having to do that not only for themselves, but for their pets, and removing the stigma of, hey, I'm embarrassed, I'm falling on hard times, and just saying, hey, what do you need? How many dogs do you have? Are you up to date on vaccines? Can I go ahead? You want to bring them in? Can I, give them the vaccines that they need? And just creating these relationships with the kids, with the adults, and letting them know that, hey, we just want to do right by your pets. We're not worried about anything else or why you're here now, but let's fix what we got. So that's kind of Kenny, you can help me along with that. It's kind of the kernel of what I do in this little bitty small microcosm in the middle of this really big pet welfare world.
Yeah, I think, Michelle, and quickly, I know we want to get to questions, but I think it'd be easy to make a bulleted list of the things Zeus's and Michelle's does, and the same thing with C.A.R.E, but I really think, like all these issues, it's how you live and breathe and walk every day of your life, right? Because what Michelle didn't tell you is when we went through Hurricane Ida, Michelle set up a charging station in front of her rescue. It had nothing to do with pets. And every day I would drive by and I would see dozens of people out there charging their devices, right? And that, to me, that's what it means to be part of the community, right? And I think, you know, when I see the wide range of people who I see walking Michelle's dogs at Zeus's every day up and down the street, and how they're part of the community, that's just how you live on a Tuesday when no one's looking, right? And I think that's true whether you're like a high level kind of national person like me who works at national organizations and talks at conferences and stuff, or you're a local rescue whose boots are on the ground, right? So how we live every day, what we do every day is always a greater indication of who we are as an individual, as an organization, than what we do or what we just see on social media. And like, I think, Michelle, every day, this is you every day. I see you every day walking up and down the street, and your staff, the way you interact with the people in the community, and it's authentic and it's real. It's not performative, and I think that's really important. So I'll leave it at, or I wouldn't be friends with you. So.
No, I love what I do, and my staff is amazing. I can't say enough good things about them. And yeah, it's just genuine. It's not, I don't have to teach them that. And I think that shows, and that's why people feel so comfortable coming to us with their needs and not feeling bad about it. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. We're embedded in the middle of the community. They don't have to drive anywhere. They don't have to walk anywhere. And just having that safe spot is great. I don't know how many lives we've saved because of that. So.
There's such a great comment in the chat from our friend Fablo, who's coming to us from Brazil. I'm in love, and it's so easy to love what both of you are doing. And I think if we could eradicate one word from our vocabulary in this industry, it's that whole educate word. It's just nauseating. We're just sharing information. We're helping. We're being part of, and both of you really exemplify that. Congratulations on the work that you do. Are we, Amber, ready for some questions from our audience? Because
I think if anybody is ready, I'd love to see some questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions for Kenny and Michelle to see, you know, how they practice what they preach, and like what Kenny was saying, right? Like, how do you do it on a Tuesday when what you've learned in conferences? How do you make that part of your regular routine?
You know, while folks are typing, if they have questions, things like this don't happen overnight. It's almost the culture of who you are, who we are as organizations. And Michelle, if I recall correctly, you've been doing this for a minute. But
6 years professionally.
Yeah, but for someone on this call who maybe doesn't feel that they have this community connection, give me the 1, 2, 3. What are the top 3 things that they should start with today on this Tuesday? And how long, realistically, does developing a relationship with the people in your community take?
It's not quick, that's for sure. But the first thing that you can do is remove any barriers between you and the person you see walking on the street in front of your rescue shelter. Go sit out there with an adoptable dog on a nice day and say hi to people. Take them on a walk on your local park or down your local street. Have have one of your business cards, and you just meet the people. And then I always say, go to the kids next, because they're our future, and what we instill in them right now and the values that they learn from watching us and the way we treat animals goes a long way. So get out there. Don't sit behind your desk. Social media is great, but everybody can be behind a keyboard. To actually put a face to a person, to an organization, and know that you are genuine and true to what you do, I think is just amazing. And every day, keep at it, keep doing stuff. Do a food bank, a pet food. If y'all are like us, most rescues, you have those half open bags of food that you're like, should I throw this or not? Somebody could really use a half bag of food, put it out there, put it on social media. Hey, come by and meet, our rescues today and pick up, these extra collars that we have. Just getting out there. You need that face-to-face communication with the people that you're trying to help, so you can build those relationships.
Thank you. There's a really good question in the chat that either one of you could take, but from Jennifer, what role do you see animal welfare professionals having in criminal justice reform, for instance, restorative justice?
I think that's an awesome question. And I can start if Michelle wants to chime in after. So I think it's funny, coming from someone, I'm not a lifer in this movement. I was a social worker and worked in community-based things for almost 15. I'm in my 50s now, so I spent 15 years in that sector and 15 in animal welfare, so in the middle. And I think the first step is we have to unsilo ourselves. Animal welfare has done this to ourselves, right? We've decided to put ourselves in a lane that only focuses on, or that predominantly focuses on animals, right? When other industries, my wife runs a public health organization here in New Orleans, right? But public health, they say public health is everything, right? Public health is education, public health is racial equity, public health is animal welfare. Animal welfare took a very different approach and decided animal welfare is just cats and dogs. Even within the space, we've decided to segment whether we're pigs and cows or cats and dogs. We've even segmented ourselves even less than that, right? So I think the first step, again, it's a shifting mindset that we are CBOs. And if you're not familiar with that, that means community-based organization, right? Because we are part of a community. So I think the first step is changing how we see ourselves and see ourselves as a CBO, a community-based organization, not animal welfare, a community-based organization, because no cat or dog in history has called any of us to advocate for themselves. We're really in the people business anyways. We think we're in the cat and dog business, but we're not. People make every decision, good or bad, that affects a cat or dog's life is made by a human being, right? So all the social factors, criminal justice specifically, to answer the question, impacts decisions people make. If you're dealing with an unjust, kind of unfair criminal justice legal system, and you can't care for your dog, who has to care for that dog? Michelle at Zeus, or the rest of you on the call at your local places, right? So working to create more equitable and fair, just systems, public health systems, criminal justice systems, directly impacts cats and dogs, because the more people have the ability to live a healthy, quality, well life, the better they can care for their cat or dog. And those cats and dogs don't end up in your care on the phone. So I think it's the long game, it's not the short game. And it starts with redefining who we are. Like the better we support our community, the less dogs and cats we have to take care of. It's just a simple fact. It's not an opinion. It's not political. I do a lot of public speaking. I ask people at the beginning of everything for 50 minutes, for this case, 20, forget what political party you care about, forget how you feel about vaccines, forget all that stuff for a few minutes and just think about how you feel about people and community. And if you want the community to be better, everyone has to have a fair shot to do the things that a lot of us take for granted. So I think that's my answer. The better and more just a community treats its people, the less dogs and cats become displaced.
Great answer, Kenny. Awesome. There's a good question. It makes me think of myself. I now live in rural America for the past 2 states. Coming from California, that was very eye-opening. But Steve Marrero has asked, how do we change the mentality of the state that treats animals as property? Their municipality views animals as property, which is very common in a lot of places.
Oh, that is hard. I've been struggling with that for, how old am I? 52 years now. I go up against it every day. It's just talking to them, trying to relay some sort of empathy, for them to see the world through the pet's eyes, the dog that sits on a chain that can only walk in a circle around a tree, the hunting beagles, which are really prolific in my area of the country, who they call them beagle boxes. They put them in beagle boxes and there's 30 of them in a yard. And just, I don't know if someone has a good answer to that, please help me, because I've tried so many different ways. And the best thing I can do is just try to make these people see life through the eyes of that animal. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it's just their way of life. And you do everything, you don't see the change that you want.
Yeah. I think the quick thing to add to that, and I think this applies, again, holistically across the board, what we're talking about is laws and policies and mandates, whatever they are out there, don't always impact people's daily choices every day the way we think they do, right? So appeal to people as people, right? Like appeal to people as people. Most people, the overwhelming majority of people, if they sit next to a sad, sick, unhealthy animal, it affects their heart. It just does. And if you tap into that, whether they're a hunter, or whether whatever their life is, and they see, we assume people see dogs as property. but sometimes those assumptions aren't accurate. Sometimes those assumptions are a result of decades of things they've observed from uncles, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And it's a long journey to change them, but maybe look in the mirror and think, there's a lot of things I think about today that I did not feel this way 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. A lot of really big, important things. So we have to give people a chance, and we can't just throw in the towel and say, well, I'm from Boston originally. I live in Louisiana now. So just take that in for a minute, because we were constantly hearing about how things are in the South versus how things are in the North. And I think there's a lot of assumptions made there that aren't really accurate when we talk to real life people.
Thanks, Kenny. It comes to mind when I listen to both of you. It's the solution is our community. We find those community members who don't believe animals are property, who do feel they should be cared for properly. And yeah, there's working dogs, but let those people, your community, be the voice, because the municipalities see us coming and they think we're crazy animal people, right?
Yeah.
But the more we develop relationships, I don't care where you live, there are animal lovers everywhere. And so we should use them.
Yeah. And I think too, just a quick, if you can indulge me, I'll try to be super fast there. I grew up in a community I don't love, but you hear people talk about, well, we have a big dogfighting problem, and then put whatever community you want in there, right? And I always think about that statement. I grew up inner city, poor, right? And predominantly African-American and Latino community. And I can tell you, were there people that fought dogs there? Yes. But for every person who fought a dog, there was hundreds of people who hugged a dog, right? And I would argue that that's true whether you're in New Mexico, you're in Indiana, you're in rural Louisiana. Yes, there are people that do bad things. But for every person that does a bad thing, there's hundreds of people that are not. And we get to choose what we want to focus on and what we want the story to be, right? And I say our job, unless you're an animal control officer, which most people aren't on this call, let the people who are designated to handle that problem handle it. Let's focus on the 100 people who want to do the right thing and maybe just don't know how or need a hand, right? So I say stop obsessing over the people that make the bad choice and focus on the exponentially more who want to make a good choice.
Can I say amen? No kidding. Very good information, viewpoint rather, not information. Chris added a statement or comment about having a great pet food pantry at their facility, but the majority of their client base can't get to them, which is probably true for a lot of us. She's wanting to do a pop-up pantry where the majority of the food pantry visitors actually get to. And maybe you could talk a little bit about this. She's asking for recommendations, but I will share that I don't remember which challenge it was, but there was an organization, Amber, they did a return to home for an elderly gentleman. And his animal ended up long-term later passing away, but his house is a pet food pantry in the middle of the neighborhood that needs it the most. So maybe identifying people in our communities in those neighborhoods who would be willing to be that ambassador.
I think that just speaks to, it's a great example of what Kenny was just talking about finding those people in our areas, right? Where this was a gentleman who had to take the bus and then had to ride his bike and then, couldn't get back with the dog on the bus and loved his dog and was overjoyed that this senior dog had found his way back to them. And at the same time, the organization was so overjoyed that they had found the home for this senior dog and didn't have to keep him overnight or, have to worry about now trying to adopt out the senior dog, and then became a relationship with this person and now have the food pantry in his front yard, which is just awesome. So again, I think finding the folks in your community. There's also organizations that have done, and it's hard with COVID depending on where you live and what the restrictions are, but who have done sort of like carpooling services or bus services where they're picking up the food and then delivering it to folks, or picking up people and then bringing their animals in for care and for supplies. And definitely to have this conversation on Maddie's Pet Forum, because I would guarantee there's someone on this call or on the forum who's already set something up like that, and they can talk you through the specifics.
Perfect.
We've done, just one more thing. We've partnered with NOPD, our police department, and they will come and get bags of food from us to put in their trunks, and they will deliver, because they're riding around all day long. They're just riding around. And so they'll deliver food for me. Like they'll actually come and ask, like, so-and-so needs a bag of food. What do you have? And they'll deliver that for me. We also go to our local, our grocery store over here is called Rouse's, and they'll allow people to stay out front and do food donation giveaways and that. So where people are getting their human groceries is a good place to set up things like that. Farmers markets, we have a Ferret market here in town, and we do some of our food drives there. We're just wherever the people go. For us, it's really easy. People can walk to us, they can take the bus to us, but I get if you're not in an area that has those things in place, that infrastructure, then where do people go? Do they go to the grocery store? Do they go to Walmart? Talk to the managers of the stores. I'm sure that they would let you sit out front with a pop-up tent with information about low-cost spay neutering, vaccinating, bring your adoptables and give food away.
Yeah, Michelle, I think you really need to know your community too. Who do people trust? Where do they go? It might be a barbershop in town X, but it might be a brewery in town B. We don't know. Could be churches, could be anything.
That's good. Yeah.
I think that's a great, Gina, a great point that I think we shouldn't gloss over, right? Like we should be partnering with non-animal groups. When 2011, I worked in Philadelphia. One simple thing, someone earlier asked something simple. I was working in Hunting Park, North Philly, which at the time was considered the poorest zip code in the United States. I went around, and in less than a week, I got the phone numbers and contact person for a domestic violence shelter, an after-school program, a human food bank, social workers, Meals on Wheels, gang and violence interruption. And I asked if I could just create a laminated card. So I had my number, PET, which was the pet outreach program, all those numbers on a laminated card. And we just handed them out everywhere. And we gave them to the social workers everywhere. And it was amazing how so many people just didn't know who to go to for what. And if we do that as the animal welfare group, imagine because we're the ones again that are a bit siloed. So if we reach out to those other partners and say, hey, I'm sure I used to be a social worker. Almost all my families had pets. At the time, I didn't know anything about animal welfare, this industry. I wish I had a number I could have given to all. So I had so many young mothers who were dealing with domestic violence issues, and you all know how that ends up for pets, often not good. I wish I had a contact person for them at the time. So I think that's something great to do is reach out locally, find those other service providers, and create a kind of network where, families have a variety of needs, right? And I think let's include ourselves as one of those resources that people are getting. It's not that hard. You could do a Google search and probably create that laminated card by the end of the day.
Spot on, Kenny. You're so right. I retired 2 years ago this week from Front Street, and I still get phone calls from street social workers who need some help with a person, experiencing homelessness, temporary care to this day. And it's all about developing those relationships. But yeah, go to that barbershop where everybody hangs out, or that corner store. And again, it's different in every community, but it's on us. And tearing down our silos is super important. We aren't the center of the universe. We're part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great way to end, that we're not the center of the universe, but we're definitely a great integral part of it. And just to go back to that question, there are folks in the chat too who are saying they partner with Meals on Wheels or their local people food pantries. So again, it sounds like there are, most of us are doing this work. So I really encourage everyone to share those ideas with each other. So we have about 2 minutes left. I don't know if Michelle, Kenny, or Gina, do you want to say any closing thoughts?
I'll just say, first of all, thank y'all for having me here. It's an amazing group of people. I've looked at some of the places that y'all are from, and I'm so excited to see that around the country, there are people like me who are boots on the ground, who are trying to help animals. And thank you, Kenny, for inviting me. And I can't wait to see you again in the morning with Odin.
And I think for me, I'm going to keep beating the same drum, you guys. We're living in really hard times, right? And I don't think we should gloss over it. Between the pandemic, between a lot of the political discord and racial strife and kind of, there's so many things. This is really challenging times for many of us. And I think and it's going to sound corny, but it's true. We've got to rise above it. Cats and dogs are the ultimate equalizer. No matter where you go in America, you will find cats and dogs. We have a secret sauce and secret weapon that no one else has. We really do, you guys. And I think we have an opportunity to show the world that we can be more unified and we can connect and use those dog and cats to do that. We have a really great opportunity, and I hope we don't squander it and minimize the power we have in this industry. We have a great opportunity. So I encourage everyone to use it.
Thanks, Kenny. There was a really important question that hopefully several of you will respond on Maddie's forum about having an emergency medical fund and sharing information with C.A.R.E on that. So if you are doing that at your shelter, please go to Maddie's forum and share that information and tell us how you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other great questions. I mean, this 45 minutes just flew by, which often happens as we have wonderful people talking about the great work they're doing, but ideas about, I hate people, so I came here to work with animals, what those folks, One Health model, lots of great stuff in the chat. But thank you so much, Gina, Kenny, and Michelle. It's always a pleasure to see you. Our next huddle is scheduled for Thursday, October 14th, again at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And this huddle is going to be centered around cultivating open relationships with speakers from Charlotte Mecklenburg and Southern Charlotte Dog Rescue. So we're going to be talking about how animal shelters and animal rescue partners can work together to meet the needs of their community. So I really hope that we will see you all on Thursday. In the meantime, thank you again, Gina, Kenny, and Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please stay safe and take care of yourselves so you continue to do the great work that you do for pets and their people. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.